Hi, welcome to episode 8, Pitch and the Miracle of Octave Equivalence. I have always said it's kind of a miracle that we hear notes an octave apart as equivalent. What are notes an octave apart? We're going to get there. First, I want to remind you about this way of thinking. We talked about it in our many episodes on meter, and trust me, we can do many more, but we talked about how time has kind of two aspects. There's the way time passes from past to present to future in a line. This is the kind of time that outside of music we think of as clock time. It's a good shorthand for it. And in music, this is something we usually measure with the idea of musical durations. How long a note is or how long a rest is. And then when you add together like the lengths of every note or rest or whatever, you piece together this whole unfolding in clock time of the music. We talked about how duration has two aspects, right? There's this aspect where it's relationship based. So a half note is twice as long as a quarter note, and a quarter note is twice as long as an eighth note. But we also talked about how then those internal relationships can be mapped onto clock time via the concept of tempo. So tempo always kind of refers to how the musical idea of time, which is all interrelational unto itself, maps onto the clock idea of time. And then we had this other whole aspect of rhythm that wasn't linear, but was circular. And we talked about it as meter. So like in 4/4 time, you have a strong beat, and then a weak beat, and then a medium beat, and then a weak beat, and then you're back to strong. So there's this aspect of time in music that we call meter, where the experience of time is circular or annular in addition to this linear version of time. And we're going to find out it's very similar in the world of pitch. Let's talk about pitch. So pitch. Pitch is our word for what we call the highness or lowness of a sound. But I want you to think about those words. When we talk about a high sound and a low sound, in what way is a sound that we call high? Is it like altitude high? Would you hear it like in a tall building or on top of a mountain? I'm giving you time to think about that. I hope your answer was no. That's a metaphorical way of thinking about it. And it is. It hasn't always been like this, and not everywhere is it like this. Some cultures describe what we call high pitches as thin and low pitches as fat. Some cultures think of pitches as low and high, but the opposite way we do. Like what they call low pitches are what we call high pitches. Some cultures think of I can't remember what all, but there's all kinds of metaphorical ways of thinking about pitch. I just like to be clear, high and low is not a literal term. It's a metaphorical understanding of pitch. And when we think about pitch as being high to low, it's like a continuum. You can have a low sound that smoothly glides up to a high sound. Our human hearing range, right, is only part of the range of pitches. There's lots of pitches I can't hear, and in fact, maybe some of you can hear. People who are younger than me can hear a lot higher than I can. As we get older, our high frequency hearing rolls off. Some animals make sounds lower than what we can hear, at least what we can hear as pitches. At a certain point, when you get a pitch too low, we humans at least tend to hear it as a rhythm instead, and that's something that is hard to explain right now in this episode. I'll get back to it. Anyhow, this basic highness or lowness of a pitch is what we actually mean by the word pitch in music. So here I was using pitch in like a general way. Here, the music theory actual definition of pitch is just how high or low a sound is. There's another aspect of pitch, though, that everyone is familiar with, even if you don't know you are. And I want to get back to good old Mary Had a Little Lamb to talk about this. So I have this handy synth version I just made. You recognize that? Oh yeah, we're back to Mary Had a Little Lamb. Now, I'm going to put in another voice playing it. You hear I kind of changed? There's a thing called phasing that happens when you have two of the same line. But now, so I have two different lines singing Mary Had a Little Lamb. I'm going to make one of them rise up in pitch. Ugly. Weird. Kinda cool. Dissonant. Wait a minute. Oh my god. Now it actually sounds like it's doing the same thing, but different, right? It used to be like this. And now it's like this. So there's still the two voices, right? What's the difference? There's this low one, this high one. They're doing the same thing, but they're not doing the same thing. So it ends up that there's this, just like with musical time, there's this circular aspect of pitch, where if you go up and up and up, it sounds different, and then suddenly it sounds the same again. And in music theory, we refer to this as pitch class. And just to get you used to it, we're always shortening that to PC. Which isn't really shortened if you think about it. It's the same exact amount of syllables, so I don't know, go figure. You're probably aware that musicians tend to use letter names to talk about pitch. And maybe you're aware that C is kind of our like central one. And if we go around the alphabet, I know that's weird to say, we don't usually go around the alphabet. Oh my god, this is so not to scale. This is terrible, and I'm going to redo that. I'm going to redo that right here. Pitch class. C, D, E, F's got to be like here-ish. G, A, B. Look, it's a circle of pitch class. And when we go around and we get back, right, here's C, here's C and D. One person is singing Mary Had a Little Lamb at C, one at D. By person, I mean oscillator and the synthesizer. Right, here it is with C and E. Here it is with C and F. Here it is starting on C and G. Here it is starting on C and A. C and B. And finally C and the next C up. And that's what we call an octave. And this is why. In the olden days, people counted the relationship between a note and itself as one. Why? We didn't have the zero concept back then. And you maybe remember a few episodes ago I was sort of complaining about how music theory never updates our terminology based on actual discoveries of science and like figuring out ways we were thinking about things were wrong. And this is a great example. Today, there's no way we would say the distance from a note to itself was 1. We would say it was 0. But the math way of thinking about notes comes from so long ago that they didn't really use 0. So they called C to C a prime or a unison. You might know both of those root words go to 1. And so they were forced to call C to D 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's why C all the way around to another C is called an octave. Sometimes it's abbreviated like this. This is called a second, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth, and a seventh. And don't think of these as fractions. When we're saying third, please don't be thinking that it means 1/3. No, 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 no. I'm going to cross that out every which way. It doesn't. It means the third step on a scale. And in fact, what I wrote here is a scale. It's a C major scale. Every note of Mary Had a Little Lamb is in this scale if you play it in the key of C, which I am. And I'm starting on a certain C with one of these voices. And I'm starting on the next C up with this other voice, and they sound the same. And guess what? I could add another oscillator, start moving it up. And there we go. Now I have 3 octaves, right? The super high one. Oops. The super high one. The medium one. And the low one. And if I put them all together, they still sound like they're doing the same thing. That's the miracle of octave equivalence. For some reason, besides just hearing whether pitches are lower or higher than another, we have this circular aspect to our hearing of pitch where every time we get a certain point on the circle, it sounds the same in some regards. Even though it's not the same pitch, it's the same pitch class. And that's what pitch class means. And just like with rhythm, remember with linear time and circular annular time, I mentioned how you can think of it like this corkscrew. So like you're going around the circle at the same time you're going forward in time. So at any given point on this circle, you're at some point in the meter. Like let's say we're putting the downbeats, these strong beats at the top of each circle. Then every time you get around here, there's some aspect of that time point that feels the same as this one and this one and this one and this one. Just so with pitch and pitch class. Pitch is a straight continuum up and down, and pitch class is a circle that goes around and around, and when you put them together, you get a corkscrew that goes up and down. So say we have a C on the circle right at the top. We go around and we get to the next C, and we go around and we get to the next C. This corkscrew idea is the best way to think about it. So just like with rhythm, you have to imagine it. Imagine a depth dimension here, and imagine that this corkscrew is going into the depth dimension so that this point isn't actually lower. From our point of view, this point isn't lower than this point. You get what I'm saying? It's like a corkscrew. Every point along this line is further up, but then every point along it is also moving at a steady rate around this circle. This is our understanding of musical pitch. It is two-dimensional, the linear dimension of pitch and the annular dimension of pitch class. Now, I was talking about how octave equivalence is a miracle. Now, octave equivalence is the word we have for how we hear pitch classes as the same. Not the exact same, but the same even though they're different. That's called octave equivalence, and it's sort of a miracle because there's like nothing in the structure of sound that makes it so it has to be that way. And I don't think we're sure all animals even have this. What it has to do with is something in our inner ear called our basilar membrane, which is somewhere in our cochlea, which is all some kind of ear terminology, and I sure am not an expert on it. But I think our basilar membrane is kind of unwound like one of those, like Fibonacci sequence spiral things. And not to get all new agey, but the shape of this kind of thing has something to do with why we hear octaves as equivalent in some way. And in fact, our ears aren't perfect, and when you think you're hearing an octave on the average piano, those are actually stretched out, and they're not quite octaves because ours isn't perfect. We'll talk so much more about it, but this is your intro to these two dimensions of pitch. Play us out, Mary.